How China's new World Reserve BRICS currency broke the US dollar. The world as we know it is changing. A new global currency is rising, and it's shaking the foundations of the financial world. China's new World Reserve currency, backed by the BRICS nations, is threatening to break the US dollar. But how did we get here? For decades, the US dollar has been the dominant currency in the world. It was used for global trade and as a reserve currency, giving the United States immense economic power. But all that began to change in the early 2000s. The 2008 crisis had a major impact on the US dollar. As investors lost confidence in the US economy, they began to sell off their dollars, causing the value of the currency to drop sharply. The drop in the value of the dollar caused inflation to rise as the price of imported goods went up. This made it harder for people to afford basic necessities and caused social unrest in some parts of the country. The global financial crisis of 2008 exposed the weaknesses of the US economy, and the world began to look for alternatives to the US dollar. That's when China stepped in. China has been quietly preparing for this moment for years. They had been amassing gold reserves and building up their own currency, the yen, as a potential global player. In 2013, China announced the creation of a new World Reserve currency backed by the BRICS nations. This currency is designed to be a rival to the US dollar, providing an alternative reserve currency for countries around the world. China's been working to promote the BRICS currency, making deals with other countries to use it in trade and investment. And as more countries switch to the BRICS currency, the US dollar's dominance is being challenged like never before. The New Development Bank. It's a name that sounds innocent enough, but what lies behind this seemingly benign institution? What secrets are they hiding? The NDB is a very powerful institution. Some people believe that the NDB is actually a tool for these 5 powerful nations to exert their influence over smaller, less developed countries. They say that the NDB's true aim is to create a new world order in which the BRICS nations are on top. So, what really goes on inside the walls of the NDB headquarters? What kinds of deals are being made? And who's really pulling the strings? The US dollar has long been considered a safe haven currency. But as the BRICS currency gains in popularity, investors are starting to move their money elsewhere. This has led to a decline in the value of the US dollar and a drop in the confidence of the US economy. The US government and Federal Reserve knew that this was a threat to their power, and they began to take action. They increased interest rates and began to tighten monetary policy, making it more difficult for countries to borrow in US dollars. But these actions only made things worse. Countries began to default on their debts, and protests and unrest erupted in various parts of the world. The US dollar was losing its grip on the global economy. Meanwhile, the New Development Bank, the Bank of BRICS, continued to grow in power and influence. It began to offer loans and financial assistance to countries around the world, with fewer strings attached than the IMF or World Bank. But what does this mean for the average person? What will happen when the US dollar loses its status as the dominant global currency? The first thing that would happen is a massive sell-off of US dollars. Investors and governments would rush to get rid of their dollars, leading to a sharp drop in value. This would cause a panic in the markets, with stock prices crashing and businesses going bankrupt. As the value of the US dollar drops, inflation would skyrocket. Prices for goods and services would go up, making it harder for people to afford basic necessities. Banks would also suffer, as they would struggle to keep up with the demand for withdrawals. A collapse of the US dollar would have a ripple effect around the world. Many countries would see their economies suffer as they rely on trade with the US. China, in particular, would be affected by a collapse of the US dollar. They hold trillions of US dollars in reserves and are heavily invested in the US economy. The future is uncertain and the stakes are high. The fate of the global economy rests on the decisions made by governments and financial institutions in the coming years. Will they be able to prevent a collapse of the US dollar, or will we be plunged into a dark and uncertain future?